Michael Saylor, him going on Bloomberg and openly telling them that the public corporations are creating a supply shock and a supply squeeze in the Bitcoin space. We really need to talk about this, because if even half of what Michael said in this interview comes true, we could only have a matter of days left before the Bitcoin supply suffocation takes hold and there's no Bitcoin left on exchanges. And that day might be coming much sooner than you might think. Let's hear why right now.
Accounting has been corrected. There's now only 450 Bitcoin a day available for sale by natural sellers. That's the miners. At this level, that works out to about $50 million of Bitcoin available for sale every day. If that $50 million is bought, then the price has got to move up to find any seller that's price sensitive. Now, if you do the math, you'll actually see the Bitcoin treasury companies by themselves are buying the entire natural supply.
Yeah. BlackRock
and the ETFs are buying another measure of that. And we've got nation-state actors coming into the space. So I think when Bitcoin rallies, if it surges to 500,000 or $1 million, then maybe we could talk about it crashing down by $200,000 a coin. But at the current price levels, it only takes $50 million to turn the entire drive shaft of the crypto economy one turn. And you've got the Trump media organization announcing $2.5 billion. You've got GameStop announcing $500 million. You've got my company that's raising billions and billions of dollars. So the writing is on the wall. Bitcoin's moving higher.
Okay, so there's a few things to dig into there.
And we will dig into them in a moment. But I want to break down what Michael just said and put some numbers behind what he was just saying. He mentioned GameStop, MicroStrategy, Trump Media recently raising $12 billion. But those are not the only public companies raising a lot of money to buy Bitcoin. I want to take a little bit of a peep at all of the other companies who right now are contributing to what I think is the biggest supply shock in Bitcoin history. Again, I know how crazy that sounds, but I do think the supply shock is accelerating and it is absolutely not slowing down. Like Michael said, 50 million Bitcoin, $50 million worth of Bitcoin is mined every day. Now that would equal somewhere around 350 million a week. Now what's interesting is when we run the numbers, that would indicate something like 3,000 coins being mined every week. That's how much is mined. Now have a look at just the 3 public companies who I've included in this tweet that I looked at, who came into the Bitcoin space and announced some big raises to buy Bitcoin. Again, this was just last week. We've got Logitech raising $1.5 billion. That's 15,000 coins. They announced that last week. We've got Venadi. This is a coffee chain in Spain. No pun intended. They just announced a $1.1 billion buy last week. That's 11,000 coins. And then we've got K-Wave Media announcing a $500 million buy that would represent around 5,000 coins. So just those 3 public companies are representing something like 31,000 Bitcoin worth of demand, or 10 weeks worth of supply being stripped off the market. And these are just 3 companies. Michael didn't even mention these companies. The bigger players like Trump Media just announced a $12 billion buy. Are you guys starting to feel what I'm feeling? I am feeling some serious tingling in the nether regions, and I do think this supply suffocation is only going to accelerate. Okay, it's happening, and it doesn't matter how the exposure is happening. It's coming from all angles, whether it's public companies buying spot Bitcoin or whether it's public companies raising capital in the debt markets to just go and buy the spot Bitcoin, or whether it's through these preferred debt instruments that Michael Saylor is creating, like STRD, STRK, and Strike, STRK. Or STRF, I forgot Strife. But all these companies, products, they're creating what I think is the most underappreciated thing in Bitcoin today, and that is this supply suffocation. Have a look at how parabolic to the downside, this supply suffocation is now beginning to look. Now, I do want to crunch some numbers on the supply suffocation here in a moment, because we do need to wrap our heads around just how little Bitcoin there is left. But again, I do get questions all the time. Luke, what is the difference between these yield generating products like Strife, Stride, and Strike? What do I do if I want to earn some income on my Bitcoin, or if I want to lend my Bitcoin out? What do I buy? What's the best product for me? Again, there's lots of different options. I have explained the differences between all of these options at the beginning of today's stream. So again, if you join late, rewind and check it out for a little bit of a breakdown of those products. Again, another option that I really like is actually the recent show partner who I partnered up with, who is FIREFISH. They are a peer-to-peer Bitcoin lending platform. You can go and use FIREFISH to borrow Bitcoin, or you can go and lend your Bitcoin on FIREFISH. And I really like these guys because they are fully hypothecated. They do not rehypothecate your Bitcoin. This is peer-to-peer lending. This is how Bitcoin lending should be done if you're ever going to engage in it, okay? Multi-signature vaults, all of this stuff is very secure. It's very safe. If you do want to learn more about FIREFISH, I highly recommend you guys check them out. And you can use a promo code Luke to get 30% off the fees on your first transaction. So again, everything you need to know about FIREFISH is linked down below, but I think they're a really interesting alternative to these debt products that we've been breaking down today. MSTY in particular, and then we've got STRK, STRF, and STRD. Those are slowly but surely beginning to become tongue twisters 26 minutes into this live stream. Let's talk a little bit more about supply suffocation and when it ends, what is the end game, and what does it look like? So here I, again, wrote this today. I'm getting a little bit frustrated at how people are just simply not looking at simple trends. And again, I'm going to be cautious of what I say, but what I think is interesting is that 5 years after Michael Saylor started this trend of public companies adopting Bitcoin, 800,000 coins have been picked up by public corporations. That's just a fact. No extrapolations going on here. What I think is even more interesting is if we jump on over to bitcointreasuries.net, we can actually see between public corporations, private corporations, and governments and ETFs, there's now 3.41 million Bitcoin locked into these entities. And the majority of this Bitcoin has been bought in the past 2 years, the large majority. So what I think is really interesting as well is, again, we haven't talked about this. I might have showed you guys this one chart once on a live stream this week, and it's fast becoming my favorite chart. This is tracking the holdings of the public corporations and their Bitcoin holdings. Now, do you notice something interesting? This chart shows their entire history of Bitcoin holdings. Over 90% of these charts on this website, they only go up. So of the 800,000 Bitcoins sat in treasuries of public corporations, or more than 90% of the companies with Bitcoin on the balance sheet are only increasing their holdings of Bitcoin. So again, it could be controversial. A lot of people say it's controversial, but I said, okay, crazy caveat and a crazy statement come in. I think it's Hotel California for those coins. And I think it's a similar case for the 3.4 million Bitcoin sat in ETFs, private companies, public companies, and nation state treasuries. I think 90% of those coins, of the 3.4 million Bitcoin sat in these areas and treasuries, are never, ever, ever going to see daylight ever again. Controversial statement, but again, this image, it's data backing up the controversial statement. Right now, we've got 5 years of public companies buying Bitcoin. The largest buyers are not selling. They're only accumulating. So this is where the numbers get a little bit interesting. This is a chart I show you all the time. This is a 16-year chart showing Bitcoin supply on exchanges. I like to zoom into the most recent 2.5 years of data here because it really shows how aggressive this trend here. And if you look at the past 6 months, I tell you this all the time, guys, About 80,000 to 100,000 Bitcoins being ripped off the exchange every month. Depending upon what data set you look at, there's somewhere around 2.1 to somewhere around 2.5 million Bitcoin on exchanges. So if what's happened in the past 6 months happens for the next 21 months, there is no Bitcoin left on exchanges by March 2027, 21 months time. And again, a lot of people call me crazy. A lot of people say, Luke, you're too bullish. You're just a hopium dealer. You're just saying bullish things for views and likes. And again, guys, I'm really not. I really just believe I'm extrapolating trends that are already happening today. I mean, it's pretty clear. We have a 5-year trend now of Bitcoin leaving the exchanges. I just don't think it's controversial anymore to just say, look, what happens if this continues? And I think this is the most underappreciated thing in the Bitcoin space today. I think everybody is still underappreciating this trend. Again, I got called a nutcase when I originally wrote about this in 2021. You can see the release date of this tweet was 2021. I started formulating these ideas in 2020, where I said eventually we're going to see Bitcoin's final cycle. And it was purely because of the supply suffocation that I thought I saw beginning in 2021. And again, at the time, sure, the people who called me crazy, they kind of had a little bit more data on their side. Because in 2021, we only really had 1 year of a trend change with Bitcoin leaving the exchanges. But since then, I said, look, this is interesting. Public corporations have changed the game. Here's the big green box I've been screaming about for 5 years now. Again, this is a 2021 article. I said, if this continues, this trend that we see in 2021, we have no Bitcoin on exchanges by 2030. And I think it's all over. I said, if we see this happen and there's no Bitcoin on exchanges by 2030, the price of Bitcoin is not going to follow a stock to flow model. That was the popular model back in 2021. Everyone's like, oh, stock to flow, stock to flow. I said, no, we're not going to. Bitcoin is going to break all of these models to the upside. And now in 2025, I think some new people listening to my rants think I'm unfair to the power law. Guys, I'm just jaded. I've seen these models come out every bull cycle, and every cycle people jump on these models and they artificially blow up their following because they know it's popular to say, oh, I have the perfect model. I have the secret sauce. Trust me, I know where Bitcoin is going. Buy my trading course or my Patreon, and I'll tell you all my indicators and show you exactly when to sell Bitcoin. I mean, it's the same thing every cycle, guys. So again, a little bit of context for why I am so anti-power law. I've seen it all before. I've been writing about these models for 5 years now and saying, look, they're going to fail. They're going to break to the upside. And the Bitcoin super cycle is going to be how Bitcoin gets monetized. And that's purely because Bitcoin's a technology. We can see every technology that's ever been adopted. It happens in an exponential trend. And I just think all of this is going to be incredibly unpredictable. It's going to be incredibly volatile, and it's going to rip faces off people. And I just genuinely think the only thing you can actually do to prepare is just buy Bitcoin, hold it in self-custody, and back up your self-custody. And those are the only things we can be sure of. Everything else, who knows what's going to happen with these debt products? STRD, STRK, STRF. I have no idea, but I have to trust someone else to buy them. This is why, again, I just encourage you guys to self-custody your Bitcoin, buy your Bitcoin, take it off the exchange, and please just have at least the majority of your net worth stored in that kind of way. That's why I always encourage you guys to check out the Bitcoin Well. I think they're the best place to buy Bitcoin. They encourage you guys to take self-custody of your Bitcoin, which is, again, incredibly rare in the Bitcoin space. And I always encourage you guys, once you've bought your Bitcoin, stick it in a Bitcoin-only hardware wallet. There's a ton of great options out there. You guys can actually get a 5% discount if you want to buy a Bitbox using the promo code linked down below in the description. Once you've got your hardware wallet, I then encourage you guys to back up your hardware wallet with titanium. Do not write down your Bitcoin 12 or 24 words on paper. Put it on titanium. These things are fireproof, crush-proof. They're even airport-proof. Okay, these things should be the only place for your Bitcoin 12 or 24 words. And again, I think that's the only thing we can really predict. Everything else is unpredictable. The world is a crazy, crazy place. We don't know what's going to happen with these stock brokerage platforms in the future. We have absolutely no idea. That's why I encourage people, just buy your Bitcoin, self-custody your Bitcoin. Please keep the majority of your net worth in a place where you have full sovereignty or autonomy over it. Okay, buying stocks, you don't know what's going to happen in the future. Okay, it's as simple as that. Something that is going to be happening in the future is I'm going to be at BTC Prague next week. So again, if you guys don't have your tickets for what is probably going to be the biggest Bitcoin conference in Europe, highly recommend you check out BTC Prague. There's a ton of actual intelligent people speaking on stage. Michael Saylor, Adam Back, Jack Marlers, and then you're even going to see the lunatics like myself, the uneducated randoms. I'm also going to be speaking. So again, if you want to come tell me I'm crazy for being incredibly bullish, come to BTC Prague. You guys can get 10% off your tickets using the promo code down below for that one. And what I said, guys, look at that number, 666 of you guys on YouTube and Twitter. I am actually more late than I thought I was, so I actually have to bounce. And with all that said, I'll see you all in the next live stream. If you do want to know how you can retire with real Bitcoin, not Bitcoin debt products that you don't own, I'm going to put a recent deep dive that I did on that topic up on screen, somewhere around there. And again, if you do want to hear British Hodl and Peter Dunworth's thoughts on these debt products we discussed today, I'm going to put a link to our recent interview up on screen, somewhere around there. Well, that's it, guys. See you in the next one.